The problem with rad trads, radical traditional Catholics. The problem is actually really simple, but it is a major problem in the church today. Welcome to All That Catholic Stuff. I'm Chris Bray. I would be so grateful if you would subscribe to my channel and give me a thumbs up. Share this video with somebody else who you think might benefit from it. And lastly, I'd be so grateful if you would consider supporting my ministry at patreon.com/Chris Bray. So who are rad trads? Radical traditional Catholics. Well, they are not necessarily those who enjoy the more traditional liturgy of the Mass, the Latin Mass perhaps. I'm not talking about those people. I know a lot of very sincere traditional Latin Mass goers. This is not the video about them. Rad trads take it to a whole other extreme, and it is a problem in the church today because it is creating division and schism. See, rad trads are people who would suggest that the current Pope is not the real Pope. They would suggest that the Novus Ordo Mass, the new order of the Mass, isn't valid or isn't licit, that the Eucharist that's celebrated at it isn't really Jesus because it wasn't properly consecrated. Like these are the rad trads that I'm talking about. And this is a huge problem today. So why is this a problem? I'm going to suggest that this is causing division and schism in the church today. And simply put, rad trads are a new form of Protestantism. And when I say that, I'm actually hesitant and almost a little bit ashamed to say that because really, in all honesty, that's actually an insult to Protestantism. Like, rad trads are simply doing what the Protestant reformers had done 500 years ago, except they're doing it with our own church documents. It's a weird phenomenon. See, what rad trads are doing is they are taking the mentality and the idea of sola scriptura, which came out of Protestantism in the 16th century, but they're applying it not to the Bible, rather they're applying it to church documents. So any of the documents or any of the dogmas that came out of church councils or the various papal encyclicals across history, they're taking a particular tenet of that and then applying it in an extremist, radical fashion. And the problem usually is that they're taking one particular era of dogma or one particular era of practice, and they're applying it universally, rejecting any new developments that may have come. I want to give you a really simple example to illustrate why this is going to be an issue for rad trads. So something like purgatory, and the idea, the teaching, the concept that we can participate now in the temporal effects of our sin, right? Like when we go to the sacrament of reconciliation, for example, like we are forgiven the eternal effects, the eternal consequences of our sin. Jesus forgives us of that, but the temporal effects remain. And so we now have this opportunity to pay for the temporal effects of our sin, our attachment to sin, the consequences that are caused materially in our life. To give a really simple, obvious example that has been used for youth group for generations is the idea of taking a piece of wood and hammering a nail into it. You might be able to remove the nail. That might be the eternal consequence of that. But the hole that it made, or the scratch or the scar that remains, would be the temporal effect. Now, we have the ability to atone for that now, here, while we're on earth. And there's ways that we can do that by offering prayers and sacrifices and fasting. And up until the 16th century, at the Council of Trent, you were able to make an offering in the form of money. A monetary sacrifice, which makes sense, right? Like it is a sacrifice you're giving of yourself, whether that's you're donating your time, whether that is offering a sacrifice of goods, what you bring to the altar, or money. However, that was changed in the 16th century because of the abuses that took place. It was changed for a very good reason. However, if we were to go with the mentality of these rad trads, this suggests that, well, you used to be able to atone for the temporal effects of your sin by giving a donation in monetary form. So we should still be able to do that. Well, that's what's happening in rad trad today with regards to the Mass and how it's celebrated. They are suggesting that, well, because in one point in time in history we were allowed to do this, we had this practice, we should apply that universally to all time. The problem is if you were to ask a rad trad if the Mass by St. Paul in the scriptures, for example, in 1 Corinthians, was that a valid Mass? They would probably have to say no, because it didn't contain all of the same prayers and the redundancies that have been added across the ages, no matter how pious they might be. And you would have to suggest as well as a rad trad that the Mass recounted by St. Justin Martyr, for example, wasn't valid because it didn't have all of the pious prayers prayed in the traditional Latin Mass that the rad trads enjoy today. See, this is an issue because it's creating schism. Like, if the Mass of Jesus in the Last Supper in the upper room wasn't valid, that should put up some red flags for us. And I don't want people to mistake those who simply enjoy the traditional Latin Mass as rad trads, because radical traditional Catholics and those who enjoy the form of the Latin Mass, those are two different things. I know so many sincere, well-intentioned people who just simply prefer the traditional Latin Mass, and that's great, that's wonderful. It's a beautiful celebration of our liturgy. And I also know lots of really radical traditional Catholics, extremists, who are making a mess of the church today, sadly. The irony of all of this is that those who would be self-professed trads, traditionalists, are simply adhering to one particular era within the church and disregarding the rest of it, and using the Protestantism mentality of sola scriptura, applying it to Catholic Church documents and councils across the ages to try and prove their case for a particular practice that they prefer in an era that they prefer. So let's pray that the light of Christ will illuminate within the hearts the truth of God and how He wants for us to seek after that in charity, virtue, and holiness. If you enjoyed this video, I would be so grateful if you would subscribe to my channel and give me a thumbs up. Share this video with somebody else who you think might benefit from it. And lastly, I'd be so grateful if you would consider supporting my ministry at patreon.com/ChrisBray. Thanks so much. God bless you.